Army Military Academy author, Xiao Xiang Donger Introduction, a novel of the same name adapted from the original project of Huanya Film and Television, GRY Fire Military Academy, Screenplay, Xiao Xiang Donger. The story tells the re-enrollment of the Fire Military Academy, which trains officers, and the scholar Xie Xiang joined the army on behalf of her brother. Tang learns, and her classmates are studying and living together. The conspiracy to smash the enemy has matured, and she joined the Southern Revolutionary Team and became a true patriotic young man. Wedge in the early morning, it started to fog, and the cold rain poured down all over the sky, forming a piece with the dark sea. The ferry's chimneys emitted thick smoke, staining the far and near sky with a layer of iron lead ash. Feeling depressed, the captain previously issued a notice saying that Shenyuan is strictly forbidden and cannot be docked for the time being. He had no choice but to float on the high seas, waiting for the notice from the shore. This time, I waited for a full day and night, and it was only this morning that I was allowed to enter Hong Kong. Xie Xiang stood on the deck, wrapped in a black coat, with broken hair hanging down from her forehead, covering most of her face. The harbour was bustling with hustle and bustle, and a row of little black Austin came in, and the sharp whistle sound came from afar, penetrating the cold white fog, and piercing straight into the ears. Xiang Xiang, it's windy here, wait in the advanced cabin. Xiao Jun stood by, holding an umbrella in his hand. A well-dressed gentleman in his 40s hurried past with a suitcase, and was about to hit her. Xie Xiang quickly pulled her with his hand. Sorry, sorry. The man hurriedly said. Without stopping, he walked quickly towards the special box. When the wind was strong, Xie Xiang turned his head, and saw a row of guards with live ammunition in the special cabin. A young figure was surrounded in the middle, wearing a brown leather coat, and wearing a pair that looked unkind. The erbiing glasses shook his neck and shoulders greatly, and twisted his waist again. There was no calmness at all, and it was very swagger. I don't know which family's prodigal son, it's not a small pomp. Xiao Jun curled his lips and murmured softly. The hard-shell military cap, the 5-point star cap badge, the yellow twill uniform, and the golden epaulets. This is the military uniform that has just been revised and unified by the Southern Metropolitan Government. The epaulets on the local area are still grey. Are you from Nandu? Xie Xiang thought secretly. Like her, this group of people boarded a ship on Hong Kong Island. On the 6th day of last month, the Tongchang Railway was bombed, and there was a labor movement at Nanping Pass. Several railway tracks were dug up, and the railway traffic in Shenyuan was completely paralyzed. Immediately afterwards, Zhou Jiming, Lu Maoan, Du Lu and other high-ranking officials of the Feng'an Department were assassinated. Commander Zhang Zongxuan was severely executed. The whole province was martialized, and the main roads were blocked. Shenyuan completely became an iron bucket inaccessible to water. When others waited, Xie Xiang couldn't wait. She made a decisive decision, bypassed Hong Kong Island, entered the country by water, and then met this group of people. Because of the arrival of this young man, the entire special chartered area was strictly forbidden on the ferry. Even the guests who had already booked the boxes were invited out. Although the words were polite and courteous, there was no room for negotiation. Then, the banquet hall on the 3rd floor became a private sphere, singing and dancing, all night long, lively, and current events are like two worlds. The blockade lasted more than an hour, and the other passengers were not allowed to disembark until the young master's convoy in the special cabin was far away. The travelers speculated about the identity of the person, but no one complained for the time wasted. Obviously, this kind of thing is commonplace in such turbulent years. Xiang Xiang, go to my house first. Xie Xiang picked up the box in Xiao Jun's hand and nodded. Kindness. The night was extremely quiet, even the wind outside the window had stopped. Xie Xiang sat in front of the mirror, silently lost in thought. The lights were warm and yellow, casting a warm shadow, and the surroundings were so quiet, the dialogue between Xiaojun and her mother became clearer in this silence. Xiang is coming to Shenyuan to go to school. Yes, Xinhua Girls' School, didn't I tell you? There are so many good schools in Peiping, why do you have to come to Shenyuan? Besides, her brother had happened here before. Shhh. The voice weakened again, and Xiang returned to his senses and spread his hair. The girl in the mirror has big eyes, a very tall nose, and her lips are pressed into a straight line, with a bit of seriousness. It is different from the softness of the daughter in the south of the Yangtze River. She has the heroic spirit of a northern woman in her appearance, like hanging in a cold winter. The pine cone on the branch is obviously not a flower, but it has the shape of a flower. This way, it should work. Chuck, the door was pushed open, Xiaojun walked in with a tray, a bowl of soup on the tray, and a white towel next to it. Xiaojun sat down and looked at her with some worry. Xiang, you, really think about it. Xiang smiled, took away the towel, and picked up a pair of scissors hidden underneath. Think about it. Opening the bow without turning back the arrow. The Agni Military Academy is not a fun place. If you go down with this scissors, there is no way out. Xiang held a handful of hair, cut the scissors across it, and let his long hair fall to the ground with a swish. I didn't want to look back. Next, Shen Junshan. Xiang's breathing couldn't help but got up quickly, the people in the front line entered the door, and the next one would be her. Even though I have been mentally prepared for a long time, this meeting is still a bit nervous. Hey, calm down. Xiang thought to himself in his heart. Next, Xiaoliang Chen. Arrive. Almost subconsciously, Xiang replied very loudly, and the other students waiting in the corridor looked at her in surprise. She hurriedly lowered her head, uncomfortably tugged on her short hair that she had just cut, pinched her medical examination report, and walked quickly to the infirmary. With a bang, Xiang collided with the person who came out inside, and the report form scattered all over the place. Sorry. Xiang quickly apologized. Shen Junshan knelt down, picked up the report sheet, and looked down at her. The person in front of me is a head shorter than me, his skin is white, his stature is very thin, his neck is thin and it seems to be twisted with a gentle force, and there is a pale pink on his nails that can't be seen if you don't look closely. Obviously I have painted before the nail polish was scraped off with a knife again. In just a few years, the Agni Military Academy has been defeated and completed. Can even this quality pass the entrance examination? Thanks. Xiang took the medical checkup sheet and turned around and entered the infirmary. Name: Xiaoliang Chen. Age: 19. Okay, take off your clothes and lie down on the bed. The doctor wearing a mask stood up, looking a little serious. He rolled up his cuffs, pointed to the side of the hospital bed, and said. Xiang Guen didn't move, and he smiled. Doctor, can you not take off your clothes? I'm a little embarrassed. The doctor was obviously taken aback, and looked up and down in surprise. He is not tall and looks a little thin, but his eyebrows are very energetic. Wearing a new set of small suits, he seems to be from a good family. You guys, what are you embarrassed about? Xiang needed his collar. I haven't taken off my clothes in front of others. Don't talk nonsense. The doctor was impatient. Get off and lie down. Doctor, you can just be accommodating. Xiang stepped forward, grabbed the doctor's wrist without a trace, shook it, pleadingly pleading. I think you don't want to pass, then go out and don't waste my time. Doctor. The doctor impatiently tried to push Xiang's hand away, pulling back and forth, and suddenly felt that his wrist sank. He looked down, and a yellow orangey-orange gold bracelet with the thickness of a little finger slipped off Xiang's wrist and put it on. In his hand. The doctor was taken aback and looked at Xiang. Xiang smiled awkwardly, revealing a mouthful of neat white teeth. She was cautious, flattering, and a little shy asked, "Doctor, have I passed?" In front of the municipal hospital, there are lush greenery and few pedestrians, so it is very quiet. It seems that the turbulent times have also affected the business here, slowing down life, old age, sickness, and death. Tan Ziajun stood outside the door, biting his lip, pacing back and forth, waiting nervously. Xie Yang trot out unconcealedly, and patted Tan Ziajun on the shoulder. Tan Ziajun's eyes lit up and he asked in a low voice like a thief, "How is it?" Xie Yang nodded, and Tan Ziajun yelled out with a wow. The pedestrians in and out couldn't help but look at them. Tan Ziajun stuck his tongue out and forced the inconceivable pressure down. "How did you do it?" Xie Yang leaned in mysteriously, turned his back to the hospital door, and quietly raised his sleeves. "I saw that she was wearing more than a dozen golden bracelets brightly on Bai Shenshen's wrist." "Wow, where did you get so much money?" Xie Yang smiled and whispered, "Fake." "Fake?" Xiao Jun was surprised, "Are you not afraid that they will look for you later?" "Come on, as long as they are willing to admit that they have accepted bribes." Tan Ziajun curled his lips and said with a thumbs up, "You are amazing." Xie Yang took Tan Ziajun's hand, "Let's go eat, I'm starving to death." "No hurry, I'll take you to a place." "Where?" Tan Ziajun smiled mysteriously, "Where the man goes, dare you?" Xie Yang didn't care, "I even dare to enter the male bathhouse now." "Blow on you!" Tan Ziajun chuckled lightly. A military vehicle passed by, and it was full of soldiers, wearing leggings, high boots, armed belts, and rifles. The car drove very fast, and the ground was full of dust. The pedestrians coughed twice, and then left each. No one cared, and no one looked at it. Everyone seemed to be accustomed to this kind of scene and to be used to such calmness. With a trace of tension, there are some dangerous days hidden in Anning. No one thinks anything is wrong, and the unfounded worries in the newspapers seem to be far from life. Assassinations, poisoning, and assassinations are the days of big men. But in fact, it is not that far away. Think about it carefully, but in a few years, the country has changed hands several times, the family and the country have changed colors, the emperor has stepped down, the Democratic Republic, the warlords have fought, and the war has continued. Throughout the 5,000 years of the country, there is rarely such a lively situation. Heroes such as the Crucian carp who cross the river, all kinds of slogans, all kinds of thoughts, all kinds of voices are dizzying, and they all want to step on the stage and make a shout in this rare opportunity in a century. This is an ambitious era, with fire buried in crisis. But it is also an era of impetuosity and erosion, and there are alluring singing among the decaying pavilions. For example, the Palamo dance hall in front of us is splendid and splendid. No one will believe that there are hungry refugees outside Shenyuan city. They are lying in the pitch-black grass shed, waiting. The clear and visible rice soup issued by the government tomorrow morning. Xie Yang was still wearing the same men's clothing that she had during the physical examination. Standing in front of Palamo's door, she couldn't help but think of the words of her elder brother again, and she stepped back slightly. "Why are we here?" "Bring you to meet a friend." Xie Yang was taken aback for a moment. "Do you still have friends here?" "Here, it's her." Tan Ziajun pointed to the huge poster in front. A beautiful woman dressed in a blue-purple cheongsam, with a long and slender neck, as white as jade, she held a cigarette between her fingers and looked over. Eyes are as silky as silk, seductive. "Chu Manting is your friend?" the passing alcoholic asked incredulously. Tan Ziajun raised his chin, "Yes, how is it?" The drinker sneered without answering, and went straight into the ballroom. "You?" Tan Ziajun was anxious and couldn't help catching up with the first two steps, and Xie Yang grabbed her. "Okay, go in." The door slowly opened, and the long red carpet was spread into the hall from the front door. The huge crystal chandelier was shining with silver light on the ceiling. The light shone on the smooth and mirror-like ground. The silver stars were dotted, overflowing with color, and in a trance. Xie Yang actually had the illusion of stepping on the sky full of stars. Xiao Jun took her hand and walked all the way, passing by the waiters and finally stopped outside the ballroom. In the magnificent hall, there is a grand stage in the middle, and a small half-curved dance floor is spread around the stage like stars arching over the moon. The huge red curtain fell down, covering the entire stage tightly. But the surrounding dance floor is full of liveliness. There are graceful women wearing a gorgeous cheongsam singing and dancing on the stage, slender waists swaying like flowing water, and the ethereal and melodious singing voices winding in midair, seemingly countless the tentacles of the bug scratched between the ears and temples. The seats were scattered around the outside of the dance floor, and the guests sat in one place in twos and threes, pushing cups and changing cups, so it was so lively. Xie Yang glanced at the guests present. These people are all dressed up. The clothes are expensive and the tailoring is exquisite. Men are in suits or gowns, while women are mostly in cheongsam. Few are wearing new style dresses. The figures sitting in the front row are all celebrities from all walks of life in Shenyuan. From this point of view, the appeal of this actress is really extraordinary. The singing and vocals were mixed together, and she soon felt uncomfortable. Ziajun, I'm going to the bathroom. Xie Yang amplified the volume and said to Tan Ziajun's ear. Asked the waiter, she squeezed in the crowd for a long time, and finally got up to the second floor. In the women's toilet on the second floor, the star Chu Manting, who had not been seen by the reporters, was sitting in the toilet cubicle, vomiting clouds and fog. The bright red nails lined her pair of jade hands even more white. She picked up a cigarette and placed it near her mouth. After a while, she slowly exhaled a smoke ring. Since returning to Shenyuan, there has never been a moment as quiet as it is now. Wherever she appeared, reporters and flashlights were always in the shadows, and people couldn't relax for a moment. In particular, an anecdote between her and Shenting Bai, the president of the Shenyuan Chamber of Commerce, has become a story that reporters rushed to report. No matter how she explained, no one believed the innocent relationship between them. Compared with the truth of the matter, people seem to be more willing to pay attention to the heat it brings. The sound of the door being opened was not loud, but Chu Manting was slightly surprised. Such a decadent appearance was not suitable for being seen. She threw the cigarette in her hand into the toilet and flushed it away, and then took out the perfume in her handbag and sprayed it on her body. Soon, the fragrance of fragrant perfume filled the toilet cubicle, and even her hair and her body were stained a little bit. Secret fragrance. He stretched out his hand to smooth the wrinkles on the burgundy cheongsam, twisted his waist and walked out of the compartment. A pair of butterflies embroidered with gold thread on the hem swayed with the pace, seeming to flap their wings and flying, and the pointed ends of the cheongsam were the same. His head-high-heeled shoes knocked on the floor, making a sweet, crisp sound. The exquisite golden handbag was placed on the sink. Chu Manting glanced aside carelessly, her eyes suddenly became sharp, and she turned around and hugged her arms to stare at Xie Yang. This gaze was too vicious, Xie Yang couldn't even pay attention to it. She asked a little puzzled, "This young lady?" Before he could finish speaking, a golden handbag smashed over his head. Xie Yang couldn't escape and was smashed upright. He held his head and looked at Chu Manting angrily, "Hey! How did you hit someone? What? Little hooligan! If you don't learn well at a young age, follow me? Do you dare to chase the female celebrities to the women's bathroom?" The woman in front of her was curvy, beautiful and unparalleled, and her harsh and sharp words did not quite match her chuchua posture. Xie Yang raised his head and just wanted to reason with her, but suddenly saw himself in the mirror, a standard men's suit and neat men's short hair. The bright light was reflected on her face, and she suddenly realized that she would be regarded as a stalker, and the originally organized fierce words helplessly turned into an apology without shock. "Sorry, this is a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding your size?" Chu Manting snorted coldly, obviously not believing her explanation, waving her small bag and attacking her again. The first time was unprepared, and the second time would definitely not let her succeed. Xie Yang leaned sideways and cut the arm that Chu Manting was waving with his backhand, and pressed her on the sink. I said it was a misunderstanding. Why are you acting like a shrew? Chu Manting was panting, and was about to shout. At this time, there was a knock on the door, followed by a man's voice, Miss Chu, are you inside? Obviously Chu Manting's shouting was alarmed. He. Xie Yang was surprised. She didn't want to cause trouble, so she quickly let go of Chu Manting, opened the bathroom door, and the person who hit the door ran out. Behind her came Chu Manting's shout. Xie Yang looked around. The reporters on the stairs looked around after hearing the movement. She pointed in the direction of the toilet. Chu Manting is there. Is it Chu Manting? It's Chu Manting. Miss Manting. The reporters flocked to him, watching Chu Manting stunned and quickly surrounded by the reporters. Xie Yang let out a long breath and went downstairs easily. When Xie Yang found Tan Ziajun, she was chatting with the bartender enthusiastically. As the delicate and euphemistic sound of the saxophone sounded, the red curtain on the stage was slowly opened. The lights on the court turned from dark to bright, flickering with Chu Manting's debut, and then thousands of neon lights turned into a chasing light on the stage. The beauty was dressed in a burgundy cheongsam, which made her skin white and snowy, and the waves of her eyes turned into countless amorous feelings. Just by appearing on the stage, she had firmly grasped the eyes of the audience. Xie Yang didn't want to appreciate the beauty, his tone was a little urgent. Xiao Jun, you don't know that I just... Before the words were finished, the voice disappeared into the warm applause of the audience. Tan Ziajun didn't know what was going on upstairs, so he put all his thoughts on the stage, pointed at Chu Manting and smiled, look, my friend is going to perform. Xie Yang dragged her with a headache. Tan Ziajun didn't realize it, and excitedly cheered and clapped hands with everyone, very cheering. Finally, when the song was sung, the audience clapped and whistled. Xie Yang clapped his hands in cooperation, and wanted Tan Ziajun to go with her first. What kind of star, you can only sing like that? A lazy male voice came from the second floor. Although the voice was not loud, it was very clear in this lively ballroom. Everyone downstairs looked up in surprise, and Xie Yang also raised his head curiously. The man in a black tuxedo sat leisurely on the deck on the second floor with Erlang's legs upright. His appearance was particularly eye-catching among the guests, but what caught Xie Yang's most attention was his eyes, and his brows were high. The eye sockets are deep, so his eyes are very deep, which can be described as a bright star. The man looked around, and said indifferently, why are you looking at me? I'm telling the truth. The pomp is not small and the level is average. Xie Yang looked at him and felt a little familiar. This person was like the young master in the special cabin that he saw on the ship. His fluttering words seemed like a bowl of cold water poured into a hot oil pan, and immediately everyone downstairs became angry. Smelly boy, how do you talk? You say one more thing to try. Everyone, you and me, rushed to vent their anger to Chu Manting. The man dug out his ears with his fingers, and staggered down the second floor with the wine bottle, squeezing away the crowd at will. Let me get drunk. Is it inconvenient for my legs and feet? The irony is that although everyone swears happily, no one really dares to stop him. Putting the wine bottle in front of the stage, he burped loudly and looked up at Chu Manting. Although you can sing so well, but luckily you look pretty good. Miss, we will get off work later and go out together. How about a drink? Don't worry, I will definitely give you a satisfactory appearance fee. Guyan Frame, I am not a poor person. Guyan Frame, he is Guyan Frame. This name is known to everyone in the schools in Peiping. Apart from his stubborn deeds, the most impressive thing is the bunch of titles affixed to his name: the son of Gu Zongtang, Executive Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Interior, Education, the grandson of director Hu Liuweng, Hu Yunchen's nephew of Commander Hu, and the brother-in-law of Su Shao's Huai, any title is extremely important. Everyone was shocked and talked a lot. Shouldn't Gu Yanjian be in Peking? When did he get to Shenyuan? This gentleman, I am not a socialite, please respect yourself. Chu Manting raised her eyebrows, her eyes filled with disdain. She has seen a lot of this kind of in Shanghai, but he is the first one who is not afraid of death. But what Chu Manting did not expect was that even as a playboy, Gu Yanframe was the strongest among them. Gu Yanjian ignored what she said, and dexterously turned to the stage, and as the scream sounded, she carried Chu Manting on her shoulders. "Shhh, be good, we're going to run away." A dozen sturdy men stood in a row and blocked the way of the two of them. Gu Yanjia didn't care, what? Heroes save the United States. The voice fell, he picked up a nearby backpack and slammed forward. The bodyguards unprepared, they backed up one after another. Some people covered their faces with their hands, and some wanted to reach out and grab the backpack waving in the air. I didn't expect to see such a good show when I came to Palamo. Xie Yang watched it with gusto, so he almost sat down and shouted. Wrong. The smile on his face gradually stiffened, how could that backpack be so familiar? Come back. My bag. Seeing Gu Yanframe rushing out of the ballroom carrying Chu Manting, Xie Yang hurriedly chased it out, leaving only a confused Tan Ziajun. The black figure disappeared at the corner of Long Street. The street lights beside the street seemed to have been damaged due to disrepair. The general road conditions could only be seen through the faint moonlight. Gu Yan's dissatisfied voice came from the front, "You are so long-winded, sing so ugly and so fat, how did you become a star?" Then there was a painful hum, like being beaten by Chu Manting. Xie Xiangsa rushed over, panting, "Stop! Let the people go, and then return my bag to me." Hooligans! Under the street lamp, at the moment Chu Manting looked at each other, Chu Manting's hatred and anger immediately shifted to her. You are a group. Why is she so rich in imagination?" Xie Yang was taken aback, and then frowned, "Really not." Chu Manting remained unmoved, "Oh, you followed me first, and then he took me abducted. You were premeditated, what are you going to do? You are robbers, you are going to kidnap me. I told you no. No. Why don't you understand human words? It's all so messy." Gu Yanframe watched the excitement on the side, "Tisk tusk, it's not a good person to be a good person." The two quarreled fiercely, and the sharp police whistle cut through the endless night. Immediately afterwards, dozens of police cars rushed out from the streets and alleys. The car door opened, and guards in military uniforms rushed out, surrounded by 3 people with guns. The black Chevrolet stopped around the crowd, and the driver walked down and opened the door respectfully. The driver saw a pair of black leather shoes, straight suit trousers, ironed flat grey shirt, and a dark grey windbreaker. Between the gestures, there is a calm wind of its own. With such a momentum and demeanor, apart from Shenting Bai, there is no second person in Shenyuan County. "Hey, you are a bit boring like this. Everyone is civilized. Why should you alarm the police if you make a joke?" Gu Yan twitched the corner of her eyes and put Chu Manting down. Shenting Bai's eyes were cold, as if the wind and rain were coming. He looked up and down at Gu Yan's frame, then set his gaze on Chu Manting. "Is it okay?" Chu Manting turned her head and stomped on Gu Yanjian's foot viciously. No matter how Gu Yanjian wailed behind her, she ran to Shenting Bai as if she had found the backbone, and said in a crying voice, "I'm okay, listen to Bai, you can get help me teach them severely." How could Shenting Bai reject her, and walked into the car while holding her shoulders while comforting her in a soft voice. When he reached the door, he turned his head and looked at Gu Yan's frame and then at Xie Yang. Finally, he set his sights on Captain He and said meaningfully, "Captain He, it's hard work. Shenting Bai did things neatly. He was already condescending once he came here. After saving people, he left, leaving Captain He with a bad face, and a group of policemen who knocked their batons in their hands and sneered again and again. Xie Yang watched the black car drive farther and farther, and gradually merged into the vast night, then looked at the policemen who were gradually approaching him, suddenly panicked, and whispered to the indifferent Gu Yanframe, "You have a backstage." "Yes, tell them quickly and scare them." Gu Yan said with a serious face, "This young master has always relied on himself when he walks in the arena, and he can't rely on himself and then rely on the backstage, and it is not a problem for a master like me to beat 10 one by one." Xie Yang was relieved when he heard that he was so heroic. "But," Gu Yan said, "they seem to be more than 10 people." "So what?" Xie Yang had a bad premonition. The police rolled up their sleeves and rushed forward. Gu Yanframe hurriedly squatted down with his hands on his head and shouted, "Don't slap your face." Xie Yang looked at Gu Yan's frame dumbfounded, and couldn't help cursing, "You idiot." With this situation now, Gu Yanjian can no longer count on it, and can only rely on herself. Xie Yang snapped the wrist of a policeman rushing towards her, swung his right arm out, and moved it forward by turning the waist and straddling it, and the man fell to the ground. Seeing to stop temporarily, all the policemen stared in amazement. Xie Yang retracted the offensive and smiled triumphantly. This trick of spreading the wings of a white crane was the unique skill of the master who taught her Chinese martial arts, and it was also the best trick Xie Yang learned. "Yes." Captain He looked at Xie Yang up and down, then sneered, and waved his hand, "Brothers, let's go together. 2 fists are hard to beat with 4 hands." Rao Xie Yang was proficient in Chinese martial arts and was helpless. In the end, she and Gu Yanjian were dragged into the police car with a bruised nose and swollen face. It was late at night when I arrived at the police station, and the full moon was hanging high, and the whole of Shenyuan fell silent, and I didn't even hear a dog barking. The public officials realized later that it took a long time to discover that Gu Zongtang's only son had been taken into prison by themselves. "Now, Deputy Chief Gu has spoken, let Captain He Househung take care of him." The police station chilled up and down, for fear that this second-generation ancestor would be unhappy and a disaster would befall, but the culprit took a few police officers to play cards leisurely at this moment. 2. Gu Yanjian slapped a card and said, "Look, things that weren't a big deal have to be done. Now it's so good. The whole Shenyuan people with faces and faces know it. The son of Gu Zongtang, the new inspector of Feng'an province, doesn't to grow up, I was locked up in Shenyuan. At dawn, our Gu family will become the laughing stock of Shenyuan. Captain He, you are such a powerful official." The 3 policemen who played cards together looked at each other. Those who could eat cards didn't dare to ask for them. They just lowered their heads and grabbed the cards. Captain He stood beside Gu Yanjian with his waist bowed and laughed. His back was slightly numb, but still did not dare to straighten up. Xie Yang sat aside, looking at Gu Yan's frame playing cards with contempt. This young master screamed horribly during the fight, and he didn't show any strength at all. Now he entered the police station and began to behave in awe. "Captain, the Gu family has arrived." The guard entered the door and informed. Gu's family finally came to pick up people. The entire police station was relieved if it received an amnesty. Captain He straightened his waist immediately, and invited the 2 of them into the car respectfully as a gift to the gods. As the car drove away slowly, Xie Yang looked out through the car window, and saw the guards standing neatly in rows, with colorful faces on their faces, looking very funny. After the car drove for a while, Xie Yang couldn't wait to let the driver stop. The black car slowly stopped by the side of the road. She slammed the door, and Gu Yanframe's voice came from behind, "Goodbye." Xie Yang waved his hand without looking back, "Never see you again." The morning sun has risen from the top of the mountain, coating the mountains and rivers in Shun with a layer of golden light. The 5 characters of Army Military Academy appeared more vigorous and powerful under the shining sun. The Agni Military Academy is set up to train military talents. There are only two kinds of people who can come here to study. One is the family of high-ranking officials and wealthy businessmen, but most of them are only to allow them to spend 2 years here to hone their temperament. After graduation, I will be assigned a decent job. Although the conditions here are harsh, it is better than spending time at home. The other is the children of ordinary people who have neither family nor background. These are often talents with outstanding performance and can only come in after being introduced by others. And Xie neither belonged to the first kind, nor the second kind. She had only one purpose for rushing from Peiping to Shenyuan for a long distance, and that was to replace her brother Xie Yangchen into the Fire Military Academy. 2 years ago, Xie Yangchen was elected to the Luo Military Academy, but died in Shenyuan in order to save people. Since then, Xie Yang has made up his mind to fulfill his elder brother's last wish and let Xie Yangchen's name be recorded on the roster of the Luo Military Academy. Wow! It's so grand! Hearing this exclamation, Xie Yang couldn't help laughing and turned his head to look. The visitor was wearing a torn gown, with small burdens slung on his shoulders and back, and he was pushing a wheelbarrow in his hands. Xie Yang took a closer look. The items on the car were all in a mess. He had everything he wore and used every day. The most eye-catching thing was the bright cauldron buckled on the pile of items. When the man saw Xie Yang turned around, he hurriedly stepped forward and asked enthusiastically, "My name is Huang Song, are you also a new student?" "Well, my name is Xiat." The words came to my lips and he took them back, and then said in a slightly rough voice, "My name is Xie Yangchen." Huang Song people spoke a lot of enthusiasm, pulling Xie Yang and began to talk about his military experience in fleeing famine all the way. The others are simple and honest, with dark skin, and the two thick black eyebrows are dancing up and down while they are talking, making people can't help but look at them. A sharp whistle came from behind the two, and Xie Yang hurriedly pulled Ponderosa to the side of the road. The black car sprinted past, and hit the wheelbarrow parked on the side of the road at extreme speed. The contents of the car were scattered all over the floor, and even the black and shiny iron pot fell severely on the ground. There was a hole in the ground. Xie Yang's eyes widened, trying to catch up with the theory, but Huang Song grabbed him. "Forget it, forget it. For the sake of a pot is not worth it, besides, I just know that I don't need to light a fire and cook at school." Xie Yang smiled, shook his head, and squatted down to accompany Huang Song to pick up items. "The military school is no better than anywhere else. You have such a good temper. Sooner or later, you will be bullied." Huang Song chuckled, smiling honestly, and Xie Yang was full of heart when he saw it. The sky is endless blue, and the sun is shining and brilliant, a little dazzling. The Agni Military Academy occupies a vast area, with 4 large venues including a dormitory, office building, exercise field and training field, as well as several small venues such as hospitals, canteens, and public baths. At this moment, the place where the trainees gather is the most extensive training ground. Outside, well-dressed armed soldiers guarded all around with rifles. In the field, there were early students who formed a group in 2s and 3s, standing lazily on the training ground and chatting. When the two of them stood there just now, someone came over to find the fault. The man in front of him had a pointed face and was tall and thin. Even if he was wearing a military uniform, he couldn't hide the dullness on his body. When Li Wenzhong came over, other colleges gave way to him one after another, and he pushed Huang Song on his shoulder. "What about you, hillbilly, are you deaf?" Huang Song endured it, but after all he did not hold it back. "You, who do you call a hillbilly?" "Of course it's the person who called us the most beggar here. You got in the middle of the road and caused my car to be crashed. How are you going to compensate me? This ability to reverse black and white is inferior." Seeing Huang Song's honesty, Xie Yang couldn't even talk about it, and he was obliged to take a step forward. "Obviously you drove us up. Li Wenzhong laughed loudly and pointed to the wheelbarrow and said loudly, "What if I hit you first? What do you want me to pay? Is the broken pot in the car?" Following Li Wenzhong's fingertips, the iron pot was glowing black under the sun, and it seemed incompatible with this neat and bright fire military academy, as if it appeared to show the master's ignorance and poverty. There was a burst of laughter on the training ground. The laughter was so harsh that Ponderosa's dark face turned red. "Bah, hillbilly!" Li Wenzhong sipped at Huangsong fiercely, his eyebrows full of disdain. "The hillbilly is also stronger than the traitor." Xie Yang heard it and snorted, and his eyes viciously crossed the badge of the Japanese Chamber of Commerce on his chest. "The country is weak, and the demons are dancing wildly. Both the Chinese and the foreign businessmen are trying to get a share of this precarious land. Not long ago, the Qing court united Japan to fight against Russia. This behavior is tantamount to using a wolf to drive a tiger." Kazuo Sato, the chairman of the Japanese Chamber of Commerce, came to power and took over all Russian business in Shenyuan. Not only that, the Japanese Chamber of Commerce also intends to monopolize Shenyuan. All the economic and trade in China were blocked by the Shenyuan Chamber of Commerce. The conflict between the two parties was already insoluble. The Agni Military Academy is nominally set up to train junior officers of the army. According to the current situation, these officers will one day be sent to the battlefield to fight against the Japanese army. This person dares to wear the Japanese badge openly in places like Agni Military Academy. It can be seen that it is also a foolish fool. "You." Li Wenzhong blushed when Xie Yang said about the pain. His father was just a small official, and he had money to spend because he climbed the big tree of the Japanese Chamber of Commerce. He knows that more than half of the students at the Fire Military Academy are more background than him, but he is born with such a pushy temperament. Today, he is embarrassed by Ponderosa Pine, but because he is dressed in shabby clothes and comes from a poor family, he is used to establish his prestige. The best candidate. Unexpectedly, the little white face standing in front of him was a sharp-toothed lord, who hit the point with a single sentence, leaving no room for rebuttal, but he couldn't swallow it anyway. Li Wenzhong picked up the basin in the yellow pine cart and threw it to Xie Yang. Xie Yang had learned boxing and kick skills from his elder brother since he was a child. Clang! There was a thunder in the ground. The noisy crowd suddenly became quiet, and Li Wenzhong swallowed pretendingly, only feeling dizzy in his head. Shen Junshan, who was hit by the basin, walked out slowly from behind Xie Yang and looked up at him. "Yes, I'm sorry." Within a few seconds of looking at each other, Li Wenzhong was defeated. "Second Master Shen, I am unintentional." Shen Junshan is tall, and his military uniform jacket is neatly tucked into his military pants without any folds. He is more like a real soldier than a student. He stood there quietly, the murderous air in his eyes gushing out, as if the cheetah who was looking for food suddenly saw a plump rabbit. Li Wenzhong was horrified by this look. He backed away and tried to run, but was kicked on the back by Shen Junshan. He leaped forward involuntarily, half-kneeling, and fell to the ground. Shen Junshan followed closely, stepping on his neck with his right foot, and making his face close to the ground with a little effort. "Those who are degrading will always be insulted." This sentence is just a meeting gift for Master Li. Li Wenzhong stepped on the foot of Shen Junshan, his eyes rested on the badge that fell on the ground, and the disgusting color in his eyes was unobstructed. Will he have any holidays with the Japanese Chamber of Commerce? Xie Yang thought secretly, but, whether there was or not, this person was considered to have relieved her and Huangsong today. Bang! 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 3 gunshots hovered over the training ground, and the gunshots were loud, and it took a long time to dissipate. Liu Zongzhen got off from the military field chariot, followed by 4 soldiers armed with guns. Before coming here, Xie Yang had already inquired about. There are 2 chief instructors of the Luo Military Academy, Liu Zongzhen and Guo Shooting, one in charge of the military and the other in charge of the text. The person in front of him is the famous Liu Zongzin. He is well-mannered, has a square chin, and is thinner. He looks like a teacher in a long gown, but he is vigorous and vigorous. He is their martial arts instructor. And Guo Shooting, who was asleep in the car, had a pair of sunglasses on his face, and his beard had not been shaved for a long time. He didn't wear a coat, but only wore a uniform shirt with a thin shirt under the muscles. The outline is faintly visible, and no one would have thought that he would be a civilian instructor. Very energetic. Liu Zongzin looked around coldly and said, "The one who participated in the fight just now, get out." There was silence in the crowd, and two people walked out slowly, Shen Junchen and Li Wenzhong. From the corner of Xie Xiang's eyes, he saw Huang Song stepping forward. He just wanted to hold him but was a step late. He sighed in his heart and had to accompany him to stand up with his fate. All those who participated in the fight took your luggage and ran with a heavy load for 50 laps. 50 laps! The crowd was in an uproar. After 50 laps on such a large training field, it was estimated that their lives were almost gone. Xie Xiang looked up at the sky, wanting to cry without tears. It took a lot of luck to encounter this kind of thing. Huang Song raised his hand and said cautiously, "Instructor, I seem to have a lot of luggage." Liu Zongzin glanced at the wheelbarrow behind Huang Song, and immediately frowned and cursed, "Are you here to join the army or settle down to have a baby? You even brought the pot, come to be a cook." Everyone laughed, and Liu Zongzin swept over with a knife, and these people fell into a chill and immediately silenced. On the battlefield, equipment is your life. Look at you, one by one, you are stumbling about, it's just a bunch of rubbish. Now, everyone is holding your luggage and running for 50 laps. There is no end today. There was no bed for dinner, so I went to sleep in the training ground. The sharp rhetoric and the ruthless attitude completely changed Xie Xiang's view of his gentle manner. At least his teacher has never scolded people like him. I don't know when, a black car parked in the training ground, the door opened, and Guyan Frame sat in the back seat leisurely nibbling on a watermelon. Half of his shirt placket was exposed outside the army pants, and even the army jacket was loosely over his body. Putting down the half-bitten watermelon in her hand, Guyan rubbed her hand full of watermelon juice on the uniform jacket, and the dark green uniform jacket immediately left a puddle of water stains. "Oh, it's all here, eat watermelon." Liu Zongzin looked at him with this sloppy look, his brows furrowed. Xie Xiang silently mourned for Guyan in his heart. With Liu Zongzin's behavior, he is afraid that he will be miserable today. Sure enough, Liu Zongzin shouted angrily, "Guard! Pick up his clothes for me and hang them up." "What?" Guyan Frame widened her eyes and looked at the soldiers who were swarming up in front of her. She didn't even want to turn around and ran away. It's a pity that the young master's physical strength is really poor. He was caught back before he even ran out of the training ground, and only his army pants were hung under the flagpole. Even in this situation, Guyan Frame is still restless, still chatting, without listening. Xie Xiang can think of it, it's nothing more than "you let me down, let's make gestures, I'm going to sue you," like this provocative words. A young master like Gu Yanjian, Liu Zongzin has not seen 1800 for so many years. He did not put him in his eyes at all. He turned his head and shouted to the students, "What are you doing in a daze? Run!" Xie Xiang hurriedly ran with his luggage. As it approached midday, the sun became more and more venomous. Don't say that Xie Xiang is a woman, and even the boys from the Agni Military Academy can't hold on anymore. Sweat soaked through his clothes, Xie Xiang's physical strength became weaker and lagging behind the other students. Looking at their drifting back, Xie Xiang's eyes blushed, and he remembered the conversation with Tan Ziajun yesterday. "Xiang, you've been physically good since you were young, and you followed the master to practice martial arts. Last time we went to Xiangshan, the three little gangsters couldn't beat you. Now you have entered the Agni Military Academy, most of those students are second-generation ancestors, 80% of them are even young. The hooligans can't keep up. You must be restrained when you are a woman dressed as a man. Don't be competitive, attract attention and show off your feet. Don't worry, I will take a good measure and maintain a position where I can't go up and down, and I will never make my head. Can't get up. Never go ahead. Now it seems that she is talking big, really young and frivolous. The trainees gasped in the huge playground. Only in the Pure Land area under the flagpole, the hanging Guyan frame leisurely sang the big show. Mr. Ma, look closer, it says, Qin Xianglian is 32 years old. Guo Shooting, who had just woke up, walked off the military field tank, shook his head and listened to Guyan's drama, picked up the remaining watermelon in the car and ate it in a big mouth, and said vaguely, Boy, sing. Yes, speak louder. Hey, the one who eats the watermelon. Take a short hand and eat a soft mouth. You have eaten my melon and listened to my play, won't you go and beg for me? Guo Shooting took out 2 pieces of ocean from his pocket and threw them towards Guyan. Catch it, kid. How much is half a watermelon? I'll give you 2 oceans, enough to be righteous. De Yang turned his face in the air and drew a beautiful arc. It fell to the ground with a ding and made a crisp sound. Guo Shooting walked over and picked it up. Hey, there are 2 big oceans, who lost it? No one? If you want me to pick it up, he said, put De Yang in his pocket, smiled, and drove away without returning. Gu Yanjian was dumbfounded. He had always been playing tricks on others, but now he has been teased by others. This is really uncomfortable. He turned his head to Xie Yang, who was running, and thought to himself that this kind of stupid-looking person is more interesting. Xie Yang stumblingly hung at the end of the team, his face pale and his legs were soft. 48 laps were already at her limit. She bent over, resting her hands on her knees, and it seemed that she didn't plan to run anymore. Ponderosa, who had finished the course, folded back from the front again, and carried all the luggage of Xie Yang on his shoulders. Run, it's 2 laps. Xie Yang gasped heavily, his lungs were as uncomfortable as if they were on fire, the tongue of flame ignited from his lungs and burned straight to his throat. Opening his mouth, he couldn't say a word, his throat was so dry and sore. Xie Yang waved his hand to signal Huang Song to leave him alone. Huang Song insisted on not leaving. He put the luggage and iron pot in his hands on the ground, and sat cross-legged in a posture that he would not give up until he reached his goal. If you don't go, I won't go. Let's not eat dinner together, and go to the training ground together. Xie Yang stroked his forehead with his hand and sighed helplessly. After all, he couldn't bear to impose punishment on him, so he had to continue running staggeringly. When passing by the flagpole, I heard Guyan frame the servant still babbling and singing, "Kill your wife and son, you will lose your conscience. Why are you clenching your teeth? Ah ha 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 ha." Guyan frame sang this drama until it was full of stars, and Xie Yang's remaining 2 laps also went straight to Haoyu. Exhausted, Xie Yang found the dormitory like a wandering soul, and fell directly on the bed with her own brand name. Her exhausted body could no longer support her to do any extra movements, so she had to lie down and look at the place where she will live for 2 years. The dormitory is a standard double room, with 2 small single beds covered with white quilts. Although not as soft and comfortable as the bed at home, it can be considered clean and tidy. The most satisfying thing is that each dormitory is also equipped with a separate bathroom. Xie Yang tilted his head slightly and looked at the bed next to him. The place where the student's name tag should be attached was empty. It seems that my bracelet was not given away for nothing, but a single room was allocated. As I thought about it, my heart became more joyful. Even with my body strength, I climbed off the bed happily and took out the clothes in the box to wash. The door handle of the dormitory turned slightly again, and Guyan frame dragged his tired body in and walked in. He was hung upside down for a day today. It was really uncomfortable. His footsteps were weak and weak. As soon as he entered the door, he lay straight on Xie Yang. Bed. My little master is exhausted. His head suddenly sank, something seemed to come up to him on the bed, and he reached out and took a look. In front of him was a tender pink lace vest. Gu Yanframe was stunned for a moment, and compared her waistcoat to her chest, looking at the colors and styles that should be the girl's personal objects. How could this kind of thing be here? Xie Yang changed into her pajamas and came out of the bathroom to see the scene. Her intimate clothing was held tightly by Gu Yanframe in her hand. She suddenly felt that the blood of her whole body was flowing back to the top of her head, her cheeks burst red, and then she lost her voice. Call! He rushed up and kicked Gu Yan's frame onto the bed, and took back the vest. You are perverted. You're sick. Gu Yanjian coughed straight after being kicked. A big man, you are a pervert who hides this kind of thing in the quilt. Why would I live in a dormitory with such a perverted person? You live with me. Xie Yang was caught off guard by the sudden bad news. If she really lives with him, then the next day. She squatted down, really didn't want to accept it all, and started packing up her luggage. Go to the instructor to change rooms. This is the only thought in Xie Yang's mind at this moment. Everyone, get dressed and come out in 10 seconds. Saying that Cao had arrived, he was thinking about finding Liu Zongzin, and he sent it to the door. Xie Yang hurriedly pushed the door to go out, and was immediately frightened by the scene in front of him. On the long and narrow hallway of the dormitory, all the students stood neatly in 2 rows. Some people wear military uniforms, and some only wear military trousers. Xie Yang secretly looked sideways. One student even had his head full of foam. He was surrounded by only a bath towel. Although he was pulling with his hand, he would still fall down from time to time. In this extremely quiet moment, the students' his eyes were on the person, and the much anticipated bath towel finally clinged to the owner by luck. Holding a military baton, Liu Zongzin walked up and down among the students with a gloomy expression. The dim light swayed back and forth on his face as he walked, like a desperate ghost. You should already know the rules of Agni. I'm here today to check your personal belongings. I hope you haven't brought any prohibited items. The first day I met, I still want to make a good impression on you, ha. After speaking, he kicked open the door of the first dormitory, and 4 soldiers filed in and rushed in. Xie Yang lowered his head with a guilty conscience as he listened to the rumors in the soldiers' dormitory. If the contents of the box were seen. Huang Song looked sideways at Xie Yang. Her pale face was now pale and scary. From a distance, it was 3 points wider than the newly painted wall in the hallway of the dormitory. He bowed his head and tugged at her cuff. Good morning, are you okay? Xie Yang was speechless, still lowered his head, but his body was shaking uncontrollably. The doors of the dormitory were opened one after another, and the students' belongings were thrown at the door one after another. Socks with cigarettes, pistols in wooden boxes, and liquor wrapped in clothes were all found. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Xie Yang closed his eyes and prayed silently in his heart, but Liu Zongzin still walked to her box. Whose is this? Liu Zongzin picked up the lace vest in the box with a baton and threw it on the ground, then turned it over with the baton, and the cream, toilet water and hairpins fell out one after another. I could see that all the students in the corridor were stunned. In the Agni Army Academy, even the flies were male, so how could there be so many girls' stuff? I asked, whose name is this? At this moment, Xie Yang felt cold all over, as if she had fallen into an ice cellar, and wrapped her tightly in shame and panic. This matter can't be avoided today. Xie Yang took a deep breath, and stepped forward with his right foot with a heavy heart, but Gu Yanframe next to him took the first step. This is mine. Xie Yang turned his head and bit his tongue tightly. What to look at, don't you allow others to have a personal hobby? Gu Yanframe yelled at Xie Yang, then turned to look at Liu Zongzin. Instructor, my girlfriend gave me this, saying that I have been in the military academy for a long time. Come to leave a thought, the school has no rules forbidden to have a girlfriend, right? This was justified and confident. The school stipulated that, Lu Zongzhen couldn't help him, so he snorted, the 5 army sticks that were found out just now, 20 laps. The guards stepped forward and took away some of the fine students. Not long after, screams came from downstairs of the dormitory, swaying along with the dim lights in the corridor. After a long while, Xie Xiang's spirit eased, and she glanced at the old who was humming on the bed with Erlang's legs. She plucked up the courage to stand in front of Gu Yan's bed. Thank you just now. Ah? What are you talking about? Mosquitoes grunting, inaudible. I say thank you. No thanks, roommates should help each other. Gu Yanja waved her hand with a face as it should be, go and polish my shoes, wash my socks, fold my clothes, and then fetch me water. Make a cup of tea. What are you talking about? She looked at him incredulously as he kicked his shoes under the bed, with a pair of socks on them. Gu Yanframe smiled even more triumphantly, I've said it all, roommates should help each other. But you socks? Xie Xiang pinched his nose and reached out to pick up the mass. Don't worry, I won't discriminate against your special personal hobbies. Gu Yan's eyes flashed, and Xie Xiang, who wanted to say something, was immediately defeated and resignedly lifted his shoes and socks into the bathroom. The water at night was extremely cold, the hands were guilty, and the nose was uncomfortable. When everything was packed up, Gu Yanframe had already stopped. Xie Xiang waved his hands in disgust, tiptoedly turned off the light, and climbed onto the bed. The first day when she came to the raging fire was spent in such thrills and excitement. How many challenges are waiting for her in the days to come? Xie Xiang didn't know, but she was not afraid. Brother, you will bless me, right? The photo pendant in his hand was gently closed and held tightly in the palm of his hand. In the final analysis, Xie Xiang is lucky. And those unlucky people are running laps on the training ground at the moment. The moon is big and round, tilting down like water, and shining on this quiet and peaceful campus, which is surging with fire. The sky hadn't been fully lit yet, faintly tinged with indigo, and the mist was drooping, shrouding the entire Agni Military Academy in light gauze. Beside the flower bed, the students who were punished yesterday were still sleeping crookedly. Yesterday's corporal punishment made them exhausted. Even under such bad conditions, the young people still slept soundly, and the slight snoring sound mixed with a little smacking sound. On campus, Guo Shooting swayed around the campus humming a wine bottle and humming a little tune. He was still wearing the old clothes of yesterday, his shirt half open, and his shaggy beard. He should have been drinking all night and staying up all night. The sharp whistle sound came from behind Guo Shooting. He turned sideways slightly, and the car wiped his shoulder all the way away, until it stopped firmly in front of the teaching building. The dust rolled up by the wheels rushed over his face, and Guo Shooting choked on his face unsuspectingly, and coughed straight down his body. The car door opened slowly, revealing a pair of dark green military boots, then a broad military uniform, meticulous hair, and a clean-shaved, expressionless, dead face. Old Lu. Guo Shooting called him. Without even turning his head back, Lu Zongzhen straightened the collar of the entire military uniform, glanced at the watch on his wrist, and then walked to the teaching building. When Lu Zongzhen's figure completely disappeared at the door of the teaching building, the harsh bell ringed through the entire campus. Xie Xiang opened his eyes abruptly, opened the quilt and rushed to the bathroom. Today is the first day of school, and Lu Zongzhen is teaching again, so he must not be late. The sound of water washing in the bathroom caused Gu Yan to frown frequently, then rolled over and slapped her lips and went back to sleep. Good morning, are you up? Huang Song's knock came from outside the door. Come on. Xie Xiang bounced towards the door while holding his shoes. Hearing the sound of bang closing the door, Gu Yanframe snorted, angrily wrapped his head in the quilt and continued to sleep. Because of the night starting today, Xie Xiang and Huang Song both hurriedly ate breakfast and rushed to the training ground. The sunlight is strong, and the eyes of people who are shaking are sore. After yesterday's corporal punishment, all the students had seen Liu Zongzhen's fierceness. No one dared to move, all of them stood obediently waiting for the instruction. Read all the newspapers today, right? As soon as he spoke, Xie Xiang already knew what he was going to say. Today, Germany and Japan are fighting in Shandong, and the state of the state is more critical, but the Peking government and the Southern Revolutionary Army have been slow to act. The people complained and protested to the government. However, protests are also useless. The army has neither equipment nor talents. When it is really necessary to fight, it can only shrink back and let Shandong be warned. Today is Shandong, tomorrow may be Feng'an, and later, Beiping may also fall. In today's world, moral justice and fairness are all nonsense. Only tough fists and solid artillery are the capital of negotiations. The country is weak, and all condemnation and protests are of no avail. All I can give you is this gun in my hand. I will let you experience the cruelest training. I will make you the most elite soldiers in the future. On the battlefield, defend our country. Defend our people. Do you have confidence? Have. Louder. Have. A shout was poured into the students' sincere and passionate blood for the country. The blood of young people is always hot, and the blood of passion is easier to believe in hope. Except for Gu Yanframe, which is an anomaly, because he hasn't come at all. Gu Yanzhilai slept in the dormitory, and was escorted to Liu Zongzhen after being spotted by the guards. An angry LV Zongzhen frowned, and with a wave of his hand, he sent Gu Yanji into a big bath. As the name suggests, taking a big bath is to soak in cold water for a day. If it is winter, you have to have a fever for a few days to heal. Fortunately, it is summer, but Gu Yan also suffers from this. Taking a big bath is uncomfortable, but training is just as difficult. The Agni Military Academy has always been a cold place. The amount of daily training is twice as high as that of other military academies, and the training difficulty is even harsher. Whether it is the scorching sun or the blizzard cold wave, as long as the regulations are not met, they cannot rest. At this time, what was presented to the students was the most basic obstacle training run of the Agni Military Academy, which in Xie Xiang's eyes was no different from the abyss of hell. The instructor who led the team was called Song Huaping, who was responsible for the physical training of the students. What's frightening was that the temper of the instructor Song was comparable to that of Liu Zongzhen. Hurry up, haven't you eaten yet? Instructor Song's roar sounded in his ears again, with the sound of road blasting mixed in, like thunder in spring, deafening. Xie Xiang jumped into the deep pit, and the pit was filled with smoke. Even so, the guards were still tirelessly throwing smoke bombs into the pit. Some students coughed and shed tears because of the smoke, and some of them could no longer support the climb and fell down. Xie Xiang found the opportunity and climbed up in a hurry. When he was about to climb to the top, a figure suddenly moved from the side, stepped on her shoulder and kicked her fiercely. Xie Xiang felt a pain in his shoulder and his hand fell loose and fell into the bottom of the pit. Through the hazy smoke, Xie Xiang vaguely saw Li Wenzong's provocative face. This bastard! Xie Xiang cursed inwardly, then stood up and continued to climb. Because of the delay in the pit, by the time she reached the load-bearing run site, the sky was already pouring down, and the dust mixed with the rain made the road more muddy. Carrying a log and ran staggering at the end of the team, Xie Xiang's face was completely bloodless, and a thin layer of skin appeared on his lips due to lack of water. Seeing that she was so worried, Huang Song followed Xie Xiang step by step. "Liang Chen, can you do it? Let me help you carry it." The voice of concern floated into his ears intermittently after the rain washed away. Xie Xiang shook his head, staggered and almost fell. A jeep galloped past, and the wheels ran over the puddle, splashing the muddy water on Xie Xiang's face. Seeing muddy water, Xie Yang suddenly fell to the ground. Huang Song was anxious, and hurriedly stretched out his hand to help, but was slammed with the whip the moment he touched her shoulder. Stand up by yourself. Trash. If you rely on others for everything, immediately pack up your things and go home immediately, so as not to hurt others on the battlefield. Instructor Song scolded Xie Yang harshly, and then pointed again. Huang Song, you are harming him if you help him now, so don't leave. Xie Yang gritted his teeth, supported the ground with both hands, tried to get up, but fell down again. It was dark in front of me, and I almost fainted. Is it that way, Xie Yang, just give up like this? A voice kept echoing in her head, Xiang, run. Hurry. It was Xie Liangchen's voice, when she was surrounded by a group of gangsters in the alley, and it was her brother who appeared to rescue her. He took Xie Yang's hand and ran on the street. At that time, the sun was just shining on Xie Liangchen's face, covering his whole body with a thin layer of golden light. He looked down at Xie Yang slightly, Xiang. Run! Xie Yang clenched her teeth and got up, her eyes gradually clear. She picked up the log and started running, staggering again. Guo Shooting swayed out of the teaching building with a wine bottle, and watched a group of running students shook their heads at the training ground. Suddenly, a figure galloped past and almost bumped him into, "Little bunny, run! Faster!" While talking, another group of guards ran over from behind him. Guo Shooting was hit several times and finally stood still. Just about to open his mouth and curse, he saw that the guards surrounded Gu Yan and stop hitting. "I'm not going to fight, I'll go back to prison." Gu Yanjian squatted on the ground with her head in her hands, acting obediently. The guards did not eat his suit, and Chi stepped forward to press him to the ground, and the screams were transmitted to Guo Shooting's ears through the heavy crowd. I said, "What's the matter?" Guo Shooting dug his ears and walked towards the guards. "Report to the instructor, this kid was punished by Director Lu to take a big bath. As a result, he attacked us and ran out and injured 2 brothers. Carry away! Carry away!" Guo Shooting looked at the frame of Gu Yan, who was squatting on the ground, with a blue nose and a swollen face. Only Xie Yang was still running alone on the huge training ground, and the other students had already returned to the team. Even though the rain had stopped, the black clouds still pressed on the top of the head and refused to disperse, and even half of the starlight could not be seen. Gu Yan's frame was thrown out of the dungeon by the guards. At this moment, except for the eyes, there was no place where this jealous young man was still strong. Under the dim light of the street lamp, Gu Yanjian saw a figure walking towards him. It was Xie Yang. She dragged the log and moved one step at a time. She finally walked to him and lay side by side on the training ground. For a long time, Gu Yan's faint voice rang in her ears, "Uncomfortable carrying wood. It's okay, it's more comfortable than you take a big bath." Xie Yang's voice was also weak. Xie Yang said, "Tomorrow, I won't be the last one to come back." Gu Yan frame said, "Tomorrow, I will beat them all down." The young voice resounded in this empty training ground, with the blood and hope unique to a teenager. The two smiled at each other, and Gu Yan stood up and handed her a hand. Xie Yang took a look, smiled and slapped his hand, struggling to get up. The dark clouds gradually dispersed, and under the moonlight 2 figures supporting each other limped towards the dormitory. The dormitory was quiet. Just after taking a shower, Gu Yanjian was naked, sitting by the bed wiping her hair, and suddenly sneezed. "Someone must be scolding me behind." Xie Yang glanced at him. The man under the light had wide shoulders, narrow waist, slightly thin muscles, and seemed to have such strength. His face was slightly red, and she quickly looked away. She flipped through her bag to find out. The pill was handed to him without squinting. "Hey, you have soaked in water for a day today. It is estimated that you have caught a cold." Gu Yan frame immediately shook her head, like a spoiled young master, "I don't take medicine." I love to eat or not? Xie Yang retracted his hand and gave him a blank glance. Gu Yan chuckled, put the quilt on and got ready to go to bed. You will get up on time tomorrow morning, right? There was almost certainly no sound on the other side. Xie Yang hugged his arms and frowned, and Lu Zongzhen's urging voice sounded in his mind, if Gu Yanji is still late tomorrow, you will take a big bath with him. She gave a joke and confirmed. You will get up tomorrow morning? If you are still late, I will take a big bath with you. Xia Yanjian turned over under the quilt, covered her head, and said dully, it depends on the mood. A fist hit the cotton, and the expression on Xie Yang's face froze, gritted his teeth, if you don't get up, I. After swallowing the words back into her stomach, she glanced at the pill that hadn't moved on the table, and sighed shen shen. The night was sultry, so only half of the window was closed, but unexpectedly the wind started in the morning. The heavy curtains slapped on the window, making a muffled noise. The sky was not fully lit, and Xie Yang was already confused. Woke up. Turning his head to see, the bed next to it was sunken, and the snow-white quilt was rolled up in a soft and collapsed ball, and Gu Yan's frame was obviously not up. Holding the clothes in one hand and the army boots in the other, Xie Yang quietly entered the bathroom. After a while, Xie Yang, who had finished finishing, sat on the bed and looked at Gu Yanjian, lost in thought. Gu Yanjian is overbearing, and if he is woken up today, he will definitely be angered. If he doesn't wake him up, he will definitely be caught by Lu Zongzhen today and take a big bath. In the balance between the two, it is self-evident which has the deterrent effect. As time passed, Gu Yan framed motionless. Xie Yang frowned and said, Gu Yan frame, get up. He stepped forward and pushed him, and the figure lying in the quilt moved into the bed. Seeing him as if nailed to the bed, Xie Yang was a little angry, and kicked him, get up. I'm going to be late. This time he finally reacted. Gu Yan frame was woken up and sat up angrily. Picked up a pillow from hand and threw it over, and then fell on the bed with a bang. Xie Yang was too late to escape, and was smashed into a straight face. He suddenly groaned and gritted his teeth, Gu Yan frame, don't blame me for being unrighteous if you are not kind. She turned around and walked to the bathroom, and when she came out again, there was a basin of cold water in her hand. Wow! Cold water poured out from the basin, and a drop was poured on Gu Yan's head. Are you sick? The anger just now disappeared without a trace at the moment the cold water was poured, leaving only a guilty conscience. Looking at the person sitting on the bed with an angry face, Xie Yang unconsciously took a step back, swallowed his saliva and pretended to say calmly, I'm for your good, you don't want to be caught and take a big bath, right? Gu Yan frame squinted her eyes and looked at her with a smile on her lips. What is the difference between his appearance and taking a big bath? Seeing his expression, Xie Yang panicked suddenly. With his understanding of him, Gu Yan frame was already on the verge of an explosion. Xie Yang opened the door and ran outside, but he could only stretch out his arm and was jumped off. Gu Yan grabbed the bed and pressed it to the ground. Hey! Still want to run? Gu Yan framed her body and raised her fist to strike her. Xie Yang hurriedly put his hands on his chest to resist, and the two of you came and went, fighting in a ball across the corridor. The door of the dormitory next to it was opened, and Shen Junshan, who was neatly cleaned up, came out. Without squinting, he lifted his foot, stepped over the two of them. The whole movement was done in one go, as if he hadn't seen the two lying on the ground. Borrowed. The cold and steady voice fell, and the stiff back gradually faded away. Xie Yang and Gu Yan stopped their movements, both staring at Shen Junshan's back with dumbfoundedness. Personality. Gu Yanjian said with emotion. I think so too. Xie Yang echoed. A short consensus could not solve the long fight. The two men looked at each other and continued to fight until the entire dormitory building was empty. They whimpered and complained to each other, and hurried to the training ground. Fighting with Gu Yanframe this morning actually consumed a lot of physical energy. In addition, because of the urgent time, Xie Yang, who had the lowest physical strength among the trainees, was left behind soon afterwards. It doesn't matter if she runs behind cleanly alone, but Gu Yanjian is still a master of both grudges and restlessness. For a while, he hummed and ran over and knocked on her head, and for a while, he dragged her marching bag and looked at her provocatively. Whether it was tolerable or unbearable, Xie Yang had a strong temper and tried his best to chase him up, punching him fiercely behind him. The two of you chased me and squabbled along the way. Unknowingly, they had surpassed Shen Junshan, who was ranked first, and turned from the tail of the crane to a far lead. Startled the eyes of a group of people. Xie Yang speeded up at the turn and threw away the people, and hurriedly climbed the barrier wall. Just as he was about to cross over, his leg suddenly sank and he was grabbed by the ankle. Looking down, it wasn't Gu Yanjian who was with that smirk. My heart secretly said that it was not good, but I couldn't think of a way to get out of trouble for a while, so I could only watch Gu Yanjian pull herself off the wall and fall to the ground with all her feet upright, frowning in pain. Xie Yang Chen, come on! Gu Yanframe sitting on the barrier wall excitedly made a grimace at Xie Yang, then turned around and disappeared behind the high wall. Xie Yang looked at him like that, knowing that this guy was addicted to playing, and then turned down the barrier wall, and when he looked up, he found a dark shadow over his head. Instructor Song looked at them gloomily with his hands behind his back. You frame with Gu Yan, 500 push-ups per person. No rest until you finish. If Xie Yang were given another chance, she would definitely not ask Gu Yanji to get up, even if it was a big bath. It's easier than fighting against that rival when doing push-ups. The next morning, when the wake-up bell rang, Xie Yang just woke up, and he was greeted by the smiling Gu Yanframe. He was standing in front of him neatly, with a basin of cold water in his hand, and a bad premonition suddenly came to his heart. Morning, Xie Yang Chen. When the words were over, a basin of cold water poured over. After a long silence, Xie Yang's rage resounding through the clouds awakened many people who were still sleeping. Gu Yanframe, I will kill you. The doors of other dormitories in the corridor opened one after another, and a group of people poked their heads out to wait and see. The fight between Xie Yang and Gu Yanframe had become a topic of discussion among the board students. There are rules in the Agni Military Academy. Fights are free, as long as you don't damage the things in the school, everything else will be ignored. Even so, the students still love and respect each other, a friendly and modest and peaceful situation. Only Gu Yanjian and Xie Yang really put this rule into practice. While brushing her teeth, Ji Jin looked at the door of the dormitory and exclaimed, "It's fighting again, tisk tisk, so energetic. Good physical strength." The good morning time on the weekend was destroyed by Gu Yan's frame. Xie Yang dried the soaked sheets and went to Xiao Jun's house with his luggage. After leaving the school gate, the prosperity of Shenyuan City came back in sight little by little. Various billboards were hung at the entrance of the store, and the modern girl smiled sweetly at the crowd on the colorful screen. The tram was loaded with customers from time to time, and occasionally people driving by new-style foreign cars swaggered past. At the entrance of Xinhua Girls' School, many female students wearing red and blue checkered uniforms with their heads left on campus came out of the campus. Xie Yang stood at the entrance. From a distance, I saw Tan Xiaojun and his classmates walking out of the school gate, shouting, "Xiao Jun!" Unexpectedly, many female students' guidance and onlookers attracted. Xie Yang greeted him and called out again, "Xiao Jun! You finally came to me." Tan Xiaojun saw her with surprise on his face, and trot over and hugged her. Xie Yang leaned his head on the shoulder of a good friend, finally showing a bit of unsupportable fatigue on his always calm face, and whispered, "I want to kill you." The feeling of parting has not yet been elaborated. The interaction between the two has already caused a collective exclaim from the surrounding female students. Only then did they woke up and left hand in hand quickly. Running all the way to the street and smiling at each other, I feel that this oolong makes people really helpless. After walking around for a while, Tan Xiaojun couldn't wait to ask her, how about Agni, is it very tired from training and live well? Who is the person in the dormitory with you? Has he found out that you are a female? Yes, do you doubt you? A series of questions all hit the red heart. Xie Yang remembered the torture of the past 2 days, and sighed bitterly for a while. The one in the same bedroom, don't mention him to me, I'm going to be annoying. What's the matter? Did he bully you? Tan Xiaojun became anxious all at once. Seeing this, Xie Yang felt warm, but calmed down, and changed the subject without a trace. I will tell you something later. Our school is on holiday. I don't want to live alone in the dormitory. Can I go to you in these 2 days? Live at home? Yes, it's all right, but I didn't tell my family about your female disguised as a man and going to the Agni Military Academy. You want me to keep it secret and go to my house in this suit? You will definitely make mistakes. Xie Yang also reacted, looking down at his men's clothing, his forehead swelled. No way, what should I do? Don't be busy, come with me, I have a way. Tan Xiaojun smiled mysteriously and pulled her to speed up. After listening to Tan Xiaojun's instructions, Xie Yang, who had changed her dress, pulled on her wig, looked at the hopeful girl in the mirror, turning her eyebrows, the familiar self seemed to be found again. Tan Xiaojun was lying at the door of the fitting room, his watery eyes staring at Xie Yang. It's so good, I really can't figure out why you can't think about it so much. Don't look, you finally come out, I will take you to meet a few friends. Xie Yang said helplessly, what are you friends, where are we going? Eat a big meal. The place is not far away, just across the street. Tan Xiaojun took her out, turning his head and smiling, high-end Western restaurant, you are satisfied with the storage. Xie Yang reluctantly followed her into a Western restaurant, and the waiter standing at the door opened the glass door for them, and asked graciously, hello, 2 ladies, do you have a reservation? Tan Xiaojun said, Miss Chu booked a seat. The waiter showed them the way. Xie Yang had a bad instinct after listening to Miss Chu, and his pace slowed down. Xiaojun, it's a pity that the restaurant is not too big. Chu Manting sat at a table near the window and turned her head to the side. She saw Tan Xiaojun wave her hand happily, smiled, Xiaojun, this way. Then she glanced curiously and thanked him. Xiang squinted his eyes and scratched his smooth cheek, as if he was reminiscing something. Xie Yang's eyes widened. Before he had time to speak, Yu Guang caught a glimpse of 2 tall men walking towards this side. After just one glance, she turned around in panic. That is Shen Tingbei and Shen Junchen. Xie Yang didn't dare to meet him like this, and he couldn't take care of so much at the moment, so he quickly said to Tan Xiaojun, that person is my classmate. Ah? No way. Tan Xiaojun didn't expect things to be so coincidental, then he widened his eyes and shrugged his shoulders. Manting, this is my brother Shen Junchen. He just came back from overseas. You saw it when you were young and you played together. Do you remember? Shen Tingbei walked to the table and said softly to Chu Manting. Chu Manting nodded and looked up at Shen Junchen. Shen Junchen? I remember he was not as tall as me at that time, he was verbose and crying, chasing behind you all day, dragging a snotty snot, haha, it's really like 2 people, I can't recognize them at all. The teeth are still the same, and the mouth is sharp. Shen Tingbei laughed when he heard it, looking at Shen Junchen. Shen Junchen was not angry, and smiled along with him. The 3 of them turned their eyes to the 2 girls on the other side. Xie Yang couldn't stand. He lowered his head stubbornly, and his hair was hanging down to cover his face. At this moment, it was futile to say anything else. She rolled her eyes and covered her face. He walked away quickly with his stomach, and said as he walked, "Excuse me, I'll go to the bathroom." Tan Ziajun nodded apologetically to several people, and hurriedly followed, I will accompany her. Ran all the way into the bathroom, Tan Ziajun followed. As soon as he closed the door, Xie Yang couldn't help thinking, what should I do? That Shen Junchen is my classmate. Did I just behave unnaturally? He don't you recognize me? Tan Ziajun took her to stand, and comforted, he shouldn't notice you. Besides, you change into women's clothing and wear a wig. It's not that easy to recognize. Xie Yang couldn't laugh or cry, and your star friend, I met her in Palamo that day. I'm dead this time. Tan Ziajun was calmer than her, rubbing his hands and thinking, calm down, don't frighten yourself in a mess. Now you go first and I will go back and observe the situation. Is this all right? Xie Yang stretched out his hand to hold her, as if holding the straw. Tan Ziajun nodded, it's okay, I said you went home in advance, anyway, they don't know you, at most I think you are a little rude. By the way, you will go back to my house after walking on the street for a while, and I will go back soon after I chat with them for a while. Up to now, it can only be so. Xie Yang and Tan Ziajun bid farewell, sneaked out of the bathroom, and left the back door of the restaurant. There was people coming and going on the street, and a high-end car drove past her. Xie Yang didn't see Guyan's frame in the car, but Guyan's face showed a different color and turned his head to look over. It's a pity that Xie Yang Chen, who was in women's clothing, quickly went far away. Tan Ziajun's family is in a long street with a good location. Her mother is very enthusiastic. When she sees Xie Yang, she feels cold and warm, almost treating her as her second daughter. Missed the high-end dinner, in exchange for an apologetic Tan Ziajun cooked the noodles herself. Xie Yang heard that Shen Junchen did not recognize herself, and was a little relieved. While eating the noodles, she educates her good friend who is a nymphomaniac Shen Junchen. Where do you see him being gentle? You haven't seen him start a fire. Tan Ziajun was unmoved, but excitedly asked, What? You tell me quickly, are you very handsome, and very aura? It is obvious that this afternoon's gathering made her face Shen Junchen has a very good impression. Xie Yang burst into laughter, Nantho. He stretched out his hand towards her while sucking the noodles, and lightly pinched Tan Ziajun's face. Tan Ziajun smiled and refused to give up, tell me about it. Recalling Shen Junchen's great achievements, Xie Yang said helplessly, it's very overbearing. What background is their family? Looks pretty awesome. Very awesome? That's pretty awesome. Master Shen is the president of the Shenyuan Chamber of Commerce. In Shenyuan City, he is a man with hands and eyes. He can eat black and white. Their family and Chu family are family friends, and young Master Shen has been fond of music since childhood. Manting, but I don't have much contact with him. Xie Yang nodded. Tan Ziajun glanced at her expression and tentatively said, Xiang, I heard my dad say yesterday that the current situation is getting worse and worse. The newspapers are talking about where and how many people have died in the war every day. It sounds scary. Now that you have entered the Agni Military Academy, will you be on the battlefield in the future? You are a girl after all, are you not afraid? When it comes to this topic, the atmosphere is always extraordinarily solemn. The room suddenly quiets down. Xie Yang lowered his head and ate the noodles without making a sound. Tan Ziajun sighed, and finally said, if your brother was there, he wouldn't want to see you like this. Elder brother. Xie Yang was silent and shook his head gently. The older brother in her mind was smiling brilliantly, and in a blink of an eye, it turned into a burnt-out photo. How could Xie Yang not know the danger of disguising herself as a man, but she could only hold on to the present, even though she was sitting on pins and needles. The beautiful holiday was fleeting, and bid farewell to Tan Ziajun and his enthusiastic aunt. Xie Yang took the tram back to the Luo Military Academy. As soon as I entered the door of the dormitory, I ran into Guo Shooting walking out with 2 thermos bottles humming. After greeted loudly, Xie Xiang subconsciously hid the snacks given by Ziajun's mother behind him. But how could this kind of small gesture escape Guo's shooting size? He looked at the food behind Xie Xiang, and then at the name tag on the thermos in his hand. On the pure white label, Guyan frame and Xiaoliang Chen too. The black typography was particularly conspicuous, and Guo shooting pointed at her directly and said, "You and Gu Yanjian are punished together." What? Xie Xiang looked blank. She knew that there was nothing good when she mentioned Gu Yan's frame. Her anger instantly burned, and she hurried towards the dormitory. As soon as she arrived in the corridor, she collided with Huang Song and Zhu Yanlin, who were opening the door. "Good day, you just came back. Gu Yanjian brought wine from outside the school. Let's drink together." Huang Song excitedly took Xie Xiang and ran to the dormitory. "Wine? How did you bring it in?" Xie Xiang frowned, vaguely guessing. Zhu Yanlin brought 2 packs of peanuts and leaned over to her and said, "I brought it in a thermos bottle." Hey! He really has him. At this moment, even a fool understands the whole story. No need to go. Shaking off Huang Song's hand, Xie Xiang ran to the dormitory quickly. "Why?" Huang Song and Zhu Yanlin heard neatly questioning voices behind them. The two did not know that the thermos had been found by Guo shooting and confiscated. "Because he is dying now." After he finished speaking, Xie Xiang kicked the door of the dormitory and rushed in, and then viciously rushed towards young Master Gu, who still didn't know the situation. The small dormitory that had been silent for 2 days regained its vitality. With the sound of ping-pong fighting, everyone felt that this is daily life. Today is another very normal day. People were beaten up and out of anger, and there was no escape from the work that should be done. Xie Xiang picked up the mop and poked fiercely on the cement platform of the toilet. She seemed to use the concrete platform as a Guyan frame, as if she could poke a white tile out of a hole with such force. "What's the matter, Xiaoliang Chen? Guyan frame has annoyed you again?" So angry. When Xie Xiang heard the sound, he turned his head and saw Jijin and Zhu Yanlin standing there to relieve their hands. She was a girl anyhow, she blushed when she saw this, and turned around and didn't dare to look back. "Hurry up, get out when you're done. I want to clean the toilet." Jijin looked calmly, "We won't delay you when we go to the toilet." If Xie Xiang was a man, it wouldn't matter. He threw the mop away. Xie Xiang turned and left, and went out of the public restroom to the training ground. In the past, during lunch breaks, Guyan would lie on the lawn leisurely and soak up the sun. "Why did I go to clean the toilet? I am obviously the victim of being involved." Xie Xiang found him and stood in front of Guyan's frame, shielding him from the sunlight above his head. Guyan frame didn't put her anger in her eyes at all. She still looked like a fool. "You don't need to brush it, and I didn't force you." "You." Xie Xiangzhe, knowing that he can't be noisy, had to sit down and stand in a stalemate with Guyan. "You don't want a solution, I won't go." This sentence is very deterrent to Guyan's frame. After all, basking in the sun is a matter of enjoyment. If a person sitting next to him keeps staring at him, then this matter will become a kind of suffering. Guyan framed her eyes as she turned her mind, and dragged Xie Xiang away. "You come with me." Gu Dashao had more ideas and more methods. After a while, a water wheel stopped in front of the public toilet. Guyan frame jumped out of the car and handed the water gun to Xie Xiang. He also held one in his hand. People stood side by side, opened the valve, and began to rush toward the toilet. The wall gradually faded from the original yellowish color and became white and translucent, and even the stains in the cracks of the bricks were washed thoroughly. When the valve was closed, the two laughed and grieved, and the hearty laughter hovered over the toilet for a while, then stopped abruptly. The innermost compartment of the toilet slowly opened, and Liu Zongzin, who was soaked all over his body, walked out. The water droplets on his hair slowly flowed down the iron-blue face. It was obviously in the dog days, but Xie Xiang felt cold all over. There was a shiver. Today, it is suitable for marriages and funerals, not to go out, especially with Gu Yanjian. After being scolded by the angry Lu Zongzin, the two of them squatted up in the quagmire carrying a log one after another. Gu Yan kept complaining, "Why didn't you go in and see if there was anything inside? People! Why didn't you go and check it out?" Xie Xiang said grimly, having been in bad luck since meeting him. When the 500th squat was over, Xie Xiang suddenly put down the log and ran towards the canteen. Gu Yan might as well be smashed one by one. Hearing this painful cry, Xie Xiang relieved his breath with a smile, and then quickened his pace. A bright moon has already risen into the black velvety sky, surrounded by several scattered stars. At this night, the cafeteria was closed long ago. Xie Xiang stood at the door and let out a lament. When he looked up, he saw Gu Yan frame swaying past with the bread in his mouth. Xie Xiang had made up his mind to ignore him, but now he is looking with the bread in his hand. She blinked and smiled, her eyes full of hope. Gu Yanjia swallowed the bread in her mouth, patted her bulging belly, and said with a pity, "It's a pity that you can't eat such delicious bread." Xie Xiang hurriedly ran to Gu Yanjian, slowly stretched out his hand, and looked at Gu Yanjian pitifully. Gu Yan framed her smile suddenly, and then stretched out her hand. Xie Xiang watched the remaining bread draw a beautiful arc in the air, and finally fell into the trash can. Listening to Gu Yan's successful laughter, touching his stomach, Xie Xiang walked back to the dormitory with a head down. With a bang, history reappeared again, and she ran into Shen Junchen who had just walked out of the dormitory, but this time it was more embarrassing than last time. Shen Junchen stared at Xie Xiang's grunting belly, and said for a long time, "Didn't eat." Xie Xiang's face flushed, afraid to look at him directly, and turned sideways and nodded. "Wait a minute." The cold voice did not contain any emotion. Shen Junchen turned and entered the dormitory, before Xie Xiang was stuffed with a bag of biscuits in his hands. "What a shame, biscuits are a luxury here." "No need, I'm actually not very hungry." His stomach yelled again, and Shen Junchen looked at her with an awkward expression, and gave her the small packet of pills in the other hand. "The biscuits are about to expire. Take them with medicine to prevent diarrhea." When the voice fell, the door in front of him was slammed shut, leaving Xie Xiang dumbfounded. It took a long time to walk out of the dormitory with cookies and pills. The bright moon hung high. Xie Xiang walked all the way to gnaw biscuits, looked up at the sky, climbed up the high barrier wall neatly, swaying his feet and looking at the pills in his hand. Shen Junchen is also very interesting. He never forgets to give the biscuits. Even if he really has diarrhea tomorrow, he is not to blame. Thinking wildly, Huang Song ran over in the distance, panting and said, "Good morning, I knew you were here, have you eaten? I have fried noodles in my dormitory, and you can go back and eat some." "No, I have something to eat." Xie Xiang was very moved, shook her hand, raised her head and poured the pill into her mouth. The bitterness spread from the tip of her tongue, and she hurriedly ate 2 biscuits to suppress the smell of medicine. Huang Song saw her motionless, so he climbed up, sat down beside her, and accompanied her with a good temper. After a while, Huang Song finally remembered the purpose of coming to find her. "Tomorrow the result of the martial arts class contest draw is out. Your opponent is Li Wenzhong, he is sinister and cunning, you have to be prepared. I'll talk about tomorrow's affairs tomorrow." Xie Xiang finished gnawing the biscuits indifferently, and looked at the moon boringly with Huang Song for a while, jumped off the barrier wall and beckoned to Huang Song, Go back and get a good night's sleep." "Var. I didn't wake up from hunger because of the biscuits to cushion my stomach this night, but the next day I still suffered from backache and back pain." The sun shines through the glass windows into the gymnasium of the Agni Military Academy, reflecting the light on the wooden floor, and the students sit in a circle. In the circle, Xie Xiang and Li Wenzhong, who are trying to adjust their state, are facing a fierce confrontation. Li Wenzhong's moves are swift and his punches are quick, and Xie Xiang's flexible dodge is gradually losing ground. As soon as Li Wenzhong saw her weak, he had a plan in his heart, suddenly exerted his strength, raised the knife and slashed fiercely. Little did he know that Xie Yang was deliberately showing weakness, just waiting for Li Wenzhong to reveal his flaws, leaning back, avoiding the wooden knife, and dexterously passing through Li Wenzhong's armpit. Li Wenzhong's whole body's strength with a single blade of cohesion was 70% to 80%, and his body could not help falling forward. Knee down on the ground was able to contain this strength, but Xie Yang's offensive struck from behind, a wooden knife cut through the sky. Li Wenzhong heard the sound, and the wooden knife stopped at the tip of his nose. Win or lose is obvious. Xie Yang put away the wooden knife, stepped back and bowed in salute. Cheers rang out from outside the court. Li Wenzhong lost face and looked embarrassed. Xie Yang Chen had always been the one with the lowest stamina in the Arsenal Army Academy. Today's loss in his hand almost lost an adult, so he took advantage of Xie Yang's unsuspecting knife and smashed it. The wooden knife slammed on his shoulder with a huge impact. Xie Yang was careless, lost his strength in pain, and fell straight back. Shen Junchen in front of her hurriedly got up, took advantage of the situation and held her in his arms. Huang Song and the others all gathered around. Xie Yang had a good fight just now, but Li Wenzhong attacked from behind and shot so hard. Everyone could tell that she was seriously injured. Although Gu Yanjian usually likes to bully Xie Yang, he cannot tolerate others to bully him. Seeing Xie Yang's small face turned pale with pain, he immediately flattened the corners of his mouth, jumped onto the stage, raised his leg and kicked Li Wenzhong on the chest. Li Wenzhong fought back to block, but Gu Yanjian used his strength to unload his knife and knocked him to the ground with his backhand. The wooden knife pointed at Li Wenzhong's nose again. "Do you understand the rules?" The tone was not warm, obviously moved. Gu Yanframe, who had always been hippie smiling, was rare to be serious, and none of the students next to him dared to step forward to stop him. "Blood? Good day, you bleed!" Huang Song suddenly yelled. Shen Junchen lowered his head and saw the blood seeping from Xie Yang's shoulder. He reached out to check her wound, but Xie Yang was pitiful. "Hold your hand!" All of Li Wenzhong's friends jumped on the stage, guarded by his side, and confronted the imposing Gu Yanframe. Hearing the noise, Lu Zongzhen walked in from outside with an angry expression. "What are you doing?" Gu Yanji dropped the wooden knife and gave Li Wenzhong a cold look. Those eyes were worse than a knife, and Li Wenzhong's cold sweat was shocked by the hot weather. Liang Chen was injured. Huang Song yelled, his expression nervous. Xie Yang raised his eyes and saw Lu Zongzhen staring at him with sharp eyes. He quickly yelled. After finally waiting for him to look away, he heard him frame Gu Yan, who was still staring at Li Wenzhong, and said, "You, send him go to the infirmary." Do you have an opinion?" Gu Yanjian was reluctant, feeling that this was like asking him, "Are you taking a big bath?" "No, I don't dare to have any opinions." Gu Yanframe muttered, walked to Xie Yang's side, with a disgusting expression, and hugged her sideways. For the first time Xie Yang was held by a man other than his family, and was ashamed for a while. Blushing, he hurriedly struggled in his arms. "You let me down. Be honest. Let me down." There was an endless loop of noise again, until they walked to the infirmary and were severely reprimanded by the doctor, and the two fell silent. "Take off my clothes and I will look at the wound." Xie Yang was startled, and tentatively asked, "Doctor, can you not take off your clothes? Doctor, can you not take off your clothes? I'm not used to taking off my clothes in front of others." "You are not old, but your thinking is quite futile." The doctor treated the patient with a good attitude, and said with a chuckle, "Okay, stop talking nonsense. How can I show you without taking off my clothes? What if I hurt my bones?" "No, it's just a bit of a broken skin. You can give me some gauze and iodine and I can get it back on my own. Then the wound must be cleaned and disinfected first." As he said, the doctor turned and went to get the medicated liquor. Xie Yang sat on the hospital bed biting her lip and said nothing. If she asked the doctor to prescribe medicine, her identity would not be preserved. Taking advantage of the doctor's absence, Gu Yan framed her back to study the medicine cabinet, and Xie Yang ran out as soon as she slipped a cigarette. Back to the dormitory, I pulled the collar of my clothes and looked at the wound. There was a wound on my shoulder, which was slightly red and swollen, but it was not a big problem. Just wash with water and put some anti-inflammatory drugs on it. The door of the dormitory was pushed open. As soon as Gu Yan was back, Xie Yang hurriedly covered his clothes and stared at him vigilantly. Unexpectedly, he was also staring at him, staring at each other for a long time, and Xie Yang was defeated. "What are you looking at? I'm seeing if you are a woman. What are you talking about?" Xie Yang was shocked and studied Gu Yan's expression carefully. He still had a slightly evil smile on his face, making it hard to tell whether he was sincere or fake. She had to pretend to be calm, swearing. "Curse, isn't it? You said that you are short and thin, with such poor physical strength. There are still women's clothes hidden in your bag, and you don't even dare to undress in front of others. You even sleep tightly. You say you are strange." Gu Yanjian touched her chin and stared at her tightly, staring at her out of a hole with scorching eyes. Xie Yang was a little flustered, and hurried to the bathroom holding the medicine. "You are crazy, I don't bother to talk nonsense with you. You better not, otherwise it would be so miserable for a woman to grow up like you." Gu Yanjian turned around and walked out, leaving Xie Yang tightly grasping the clothes on his chest, and exhaled heavily. Because Xie Yang was injured, Huang Song brought him both lunch and dinner. She lay on the bed in the afternoon and slept several times without knowing it. When the moon was in the middle of the sky, Gu Yan's breathing became heavier next to him, but Xie Yang couldn't sleep anymore. He simply sat on the bed and looked at the moonlight outside the window in a daze. The moon tonight is big and round, rare and bright, just like the moon on that night many years ago. At that time, Xie Yang Chen was still there, and Xie Yang was still the little girl who knew nothing about the world. In the past, I sat on the steps with Xie Yang Chen and watched the moon vividly. The cold wind was slow. At that time, she still had waist-long hair, and when the wind blew, she would dance with the wind like seaweed. "Brother, Dad said that the situation in Feng'an is not good, and it would be dangerous for you to join the army." Xie Yang Chen gently stroked the top of her hair, with a long gaze. "Who will go if I don't go? Xiang, you will understand in the future that there are certain things that someone must do, although it may not be successful, although it doesn't help the overall situation, but we still have to go. The wire saws the wood and the water drips through. Any great cause is completed step by step. As long as you don't give up, there will always be a successful day." She looked at her elder brother, with a lot of thoughts in her heart, but she couldn't say anything, so she had to cover her choking and leaned her head on him. "Well, I'll wait for the day you successfully return." "Okay," Xie Yang Chen spoke firmly. He flicked the cigarette in his hand and chuckled. "It's not good to smoke, don't learn it." Mars drew a dazzling arc in the sky, bright and splendid. When the cigarette fell, the sparks gradually extinguished, hiding in the darkness. Who would have thought that this difference is forever? Since then, Xie Yang stopped dancing, but went into the Luo Military Academy and continued to live as Xie Yang Chen. Perhaps only here can Xie Yang be told how to become a fighter like Xie Yang Chen. Or maybe, this place will become the final destination of Xie Yang's life. Thinking of this, Xie Yang didn't dare to think anymore, and hurriedly walked out the door wearing a piece of clothing. She was more deeply exposed, and the cold water vapor rushing towards her immediately calmed her down. Looking up, there was fire faintly flickering in the night of Ruyuan. Xie Yang walked over and saw Shen Junchen sitting on the roof of the bungalow warehouse smoking a cigarette. Seeing her climbing up the ladder, Shen Junchen shook the flue in his hand. "Do you smoke?" Xie Yang shook his head quickly. "I won't. I didn't know it before. I learned it abroad, but now I don't think it tastes enough to smoke domestic cigarettes. Why come back? Now the domestic situation is not good, there are wars everywhere, and many of my friends have gone abroad with their families. There are some things that cannot be avoided. Someone has to do something. The rope saw the wood broken, the water dripped through the stone. As long as you dare to hit the road, you will always be one step closer to the end. Shen Junchen smiled and flicked out the cigarette in the air. Draws an arc and flies over. Smoking is not good, don't learn it. Xie Yang was a little stunned, she responded in a low voice, and then fell into silence. She did not speak, nor did Shen Junchen speak, and the atmosphere suddenly became embarrassing. After a long time, Xie Yang continued, by the way, thank you for today's gymnasium. Thank you? Did I help you? Then you should thank Guyan for the frame. He is so disgusting, I don't want to thank him. Listen to the tone, you don't like him, it's a coincidence, I don't like him either. Shen Junchen's tone was indifferent, just like him, but instead of saying that he doesn't like it, it's better to be jealous. Life so chic and wanton. Shen Junchen rarely said so much. He got up and patted the dust on his body, it's late at night, let's go back. Xie Yang followed Shen Junchen in silence, but he was thinking of what he had just said. There is such a kind of people in this world who are born unconstrained and lively and freely throughout their lives. Even in the most turbulent times, he can still maintain his true self. It seems that he lives more sober than anyone else. He clearly knows what he wants, and he will seek what he wants in the most comfortable posture. If Xie Yang had to use one word to describe Guyan frame, it would probably be the sun. The morning sun in the morning is too cool and thin, and the sunset in the evening is too heavy. Only the scorching sun is right, hot and dazzling.